Hi, this is Congressman Tom Cole from the 4th District of Oklahoma. It's another one of our weekly congressional chats. Congress actually continues to be quite busy, but not so much on the floor. We've certainly had legislation. I would say anything that comes to the floor of the House of Representatives is important, but honestly, major legislation takes a long time to prepare. Right now, the two areas that we see the most movement in are first and foremost what's called the Big Beautiful Bill, or reconciliation. Committees continue to meet. A number of them have turned out different products. We still have some big ones to go. And the way reconciliation works, which just to remind you, is this would be all the Trump tax cuts from 17, the proposals to renew them, additional money for defense, about $150 billion over a 4-year period, $175 billion for border security. So it's a big bill, and it has to go to each different committee, and so far, or 11 different committees. My committee, Appropriations, is not one of them, but so far at least 7 have acted. They've all met the targets they were supposed to meet in terms of reducing spending so the tax cuts can move ahead. Ways and Means, which would actually write the tax cuts, has not yet met. Energy and Commerce, which has the most money to save a target of $800 billion. That's a lot of money, but it's over a decade. So it's not as big a jump or big a thing as it sounds. And you'd still have Medicaid moving up every year, for instance. But regardless, these committees either have met, and the ones that have all met their targets, or will meet next week. Next week will be a very big week in terms of dealing with the tax bill. But and a lot of issues still haven't been resolved. There are a number of hot issues. Things like the state and local tax deduction doesn't affect us much in Oklahoma. It does affect New York, New Jersey, California. A lot of those are high tax states, so when they lost that unlimited deduction that they had, taxpayers there ended up paying more money. Frankly, we have members in those states whose votes we need. So they feel pretty strongly about protecting their constituents. We still have, issues to solve on Medicaid, how much money can be taken out of there through reform and change, and making sure illegal immigrants aren't getting on Medicaid, making sure that if you're an able-bodied single male that you actually have a work requirement. Those sorts of things. This would not, knock off single moms, would not knock off people with genuine disabilities, those sorts of things. So all this is very, very complex. But again, I would say this week we broadly moved in the right direction, continued to make progress. We'll see what happens next week's a more challenging week, because they would like to have this done by the end of the week. I'm not sure that's feasible, but it's a good goal to have. So we'll see how that goes. But the second thing is that we had a lot of movement on appropriations. That's some place where I am obviously deeply involved, the chairman of that committee. Last Saturday we got from the administration what's called the skinny budget, which is basically what's the top line in domestic spending that you want to send, and what's the division between defense and non-defense, those sorts of things. I think the president put a good proposal out there. It's going to be hard because it calls for reducing domestic spending, including some areas that I think are very important, but it calls for an increase in defense spending using money in both the reconciliation package and the normal approach package. That's a good thing. It calls for additional investments at the FAA Center, the Mike Mulroney Center in Oklahoma. I actually had a discussion today with the administrator of the FAA about the additional money we need to spend to train more air traffic control personnel, to modernize the facilities and the technology. These are things that Oklahoma has a big stake in, and we're pretty fortunate. We have 2 appropriators there. This is in Frank Lucas's district, but it's in Oklahoma City, and Stephanie Bice is on this committee, and obviously very used to represent the center I've got a lot of workers in my district and from there, so all three of us are very concerned. But Stephanie and I are very well positioned to be helpful, to make sure the investments are done there. So we're starting to look at the president's budget. We had a week full of hearings where cabinet members came up and testified, or agency heads, or I had attended a number of meetings. One with the Secretary of the Army. Obviously, we have major Army investments in the 4th District at Fort Sill. Had the opportunity to talk to the Secretary of the Air Force and the Chief of Staff in both cases about Tinker Air Force Base, some of our needs there, some of the air fleets we're trying to modernize, like providing a new platform for AWACS that most of whom fly out of Oklahoma City. So we have lots of interest. Had an opportunity to meet with, or to also attend a hearing with the Agriculture Secretary. She's actually quite impressive. It's the first time I'd met her. But our district, we have 13 to 14,000 farms. We export close to $1 billion worth of food products a year beyond the United States. So we have a big stake in what's going on in that community, and we've got some concerns about federal commitments that were made and have not been kept under the previous administration. Can our new secretary help us with that? I think she's going to be able to do that. So that was a particularly productive hearing. We also had the new director of the FBI, Kash Patel. I attended that hearing. He's actually a guy I know quite well. He was a staffer here on the Hill, and was the chief of staff for the Intelligence Committee, and later an assistant secretary of defense. Very well credentialed guy, but he worked for Devin Nunes, who's a classmate of mine, who chaired Intel, so we got to be good friends. I'm really pleased to see him in that position. I know he will do an excellent job. I think it was one of the presidents had a lot of great appointments. I think this is one of the better ones. So been a very active week on the approach committee. There were other committee meetings I couldn't go to, subcommittees. There's 12 of them, so can't be at every one of them. But I try to cover as many as I possibly can, and particularly the ones like when we've got the Secretary of the Army, and we have Fort Sill, and we have the Secretary of the Air Force Base. We have, of course, Tinker in my district, but also Vance Air Force Base and Altus Air Force Base in western Oklahoma. Those are important hearings. Oklahoma has a very big stake in those things, and we all try to work together as a delegation to get across them. But I'm excited that we've seen it. We still need to see the president's full budget. That has not been submitted to us yet. We hope we get it by the end of May. I'm afraid it may come in June. That makes our deadlines very tough. We've got to get these bills out of committee, then they have to get across the floor. Then we have to conference with the Senate, who also has to do the same sequence of event, or at least come to some sort of agreement with the Senate, because the time will run out come September 30th. And we'll have a government shutdown or another continuing resolution, or we'll have our work done. I would prefer getting our work done. I don't want to shut down under any circumstances. I think they're never productive, and they're always expensive. They don't work. But again, this was big movement this week in the appropriations, positive movement. We have some clearer idea of what the president wants to do. We're broadly in agreement with him. We're going to disagree in certain areas, but I finally feel like the administration is giving us some of the substantive information we need to work together with the president to pass these things. So very good week in that regard. Finally, let me end on something that I don't know a great deal about at this point, but I take as a very positive sign. It was announced today that we're going to sign a trade agreement with the United Kingdom, Great Britain. Of course, they're a substantial trading partner, fourth largest trading partner for us, close ally, close friend, country that always keeps its commitments, that's always been above its required number at NATO, that works with us all over the world. So it's a really important thing that we have this agreement with them. It's gratifying that it is the first one we have. But the important thing we'll see when it finally comes out is it a template? In other words, is it the kind of agreement that we could apply to Japan, we could apply to India. Each one will be a little bit different, but I think each one will probably improve the trading position of the United States. And that's one of the things the President's trying to do. He's trying to make sure that we're no longer taken advantage of all over the world. And I think there's other countries that you can't blame them. They'll get the best deal they can for their side. But the point is they recognize the United States is important to them. It's an important market. In the case of England, it's an important ally. I noticed the British Prime Minister made the point that the relationship with the United States was their most important relationship in terms of defense, economics, you name it. And of course, the British have very substantial investments in the United States. You know, British Petroleum is here, does a lot of work. They own lots of land and resources in America. So again, they want an open, good working agreement with the United States. I would point out too, by the way, we actually run a trade surplus with Britain, unlike a lot of other countries. So they have actually been much better to work with, particularly since they've left the European Union than they were before. So again, 3 good things this week. Progress on the tax front, on the reconciliation bill, approach, the beginning of a real approach process with the President laying out the broad vision of his budget that he wants, and with members of the cabinet coming up and holding active hearings, and now this trade agreement with the United Kingdom, our closest ally in many ways. So all that I think is a good thing. So Congress certainly didn't get big things done this week, but it moved in the right directions, and a pretty positive week for the Congress. I think a pretty positive week for the country. So with that, I hope you have a great time. We'll be visiting with you again next week. So good luck. God bless. Hope your families are safe and secure. And I look forward to chatting with you again soon.